The cartographer stirs before the sun crests the horizon, his breath visible in the cold hush of the stone chamber. Above, the wind brushes softly against the tower's narrow windows, each pane shuddering slightly as if resisting the dawn. Outside, the sea moves in long, rhythmic surges, constant, murmuring, eternal. He rises from a narrow cot tucked against the tower's circular wall, feet meeting the cool flagstones with a practiced patience. There are no clocks here, no bells, only the light and the tide mark time. And this morning, the tide is low and the eastern sky is pale with promise. A kettle rests on the iron tripod above a faint ember glow. He stokes it gently, adding a pinch of driftwood and watching smoke curl into lazy spirals toward the ceiling's beams. His hands, though calloused and stained with ink, move carefully. He is never hurried. Precision is a habit deeper than instinct. As the kettle warms, he unrolls the canvas covering his workbench. Maps lie beneath, some fresh, some weathered, all part of a larger web of places half seen and imagined. The parchment sighs slightly as it settles, soft, creased, filled with the memory of touch. Each map carries with it a story, not just of geography, but of the moment it was drawn. A rainstorm outside, a letter from a ship, the scent of lemons once traded for ink. He pours hot water over dried leaves, nettle, rosemary, a few crushed juniper berries. The scent is wild and clean, like the cliffs themselves. The tea steeps as he leans into the eastern window, peering out over the horizon where light begins to bloom in faint gold. One gull cries out from a distant crag, its wings cutting the morning like a slow breath. From this height, the world curves gently, islands rise from the mist, seabirds wheel above shifting shoals. The cartographer doesn't name these sights aloud. He knows them, not as words, but as marks, as points of memory and form. He sips his tea, the heat anchoring him to the moment, the taste earthy and sharp against the cool salt of the morning air. Around him, the tower begins to glow softly. The stone takes on color. Shadows retreat slowly, like dreams lifting from pages. He opens the shutters fully, and a rush of salt air and light enters, mingling with the smell of tea and smoke. Dust motes dance in the light, slow and luminous. He walks slowly around the circular room, trailing his fingers across the edges of tools, calipers, compasses, pens, each worn into his grip. Each has its own memory, its own whisper. A small wooden chest holds old ink pots, each one labelled in his own looping hand: ocean, silt, starfall, drift. The pigments inside are handmade, ground slowly under the Watchtower's silence. A journal lies open near the edge of the bench, its pages filled with delicate script and margin notes, wind speeds, shifting sands, the sightings of unfamiliar birds. The ink has faded in places, but the meaning remains layered and rich. He thumbs the edge of the last page he wrote, considering where to begin again. A distant bell from a fishing vessel faintly echoes up the cliffs, carried by the wind like a forgotten voice. He listens, not for the sound itself, but for the silence that follows. It tells him the day has begun, not by measure, but by mood. He breathes in slowly. There is no need to rush. The world waits to be observed, not conquered. He closes his eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm of the waves settle into his chest. Then, with quiet intent, he reaches for his compass. The cartographer places his compass gently on the vellum. The tool is old, brass arms dulled with age, its joints smooth from years of motion. It rests in his palm like an extension of thought, waiting. He adjusts the pin, breathing steadily, aligning it not with lines already drawn, but with those that have yet to be imagined. This is not the drawing of what is known. It is the ritual of coaxing the unknown into shape. Every mark must be earned, every arc must be felt. The map does not command, it asks. He responds with quiet precision. Beside the compass lies a collection of rulers, ivory, bone, and weathered wood, each one different, each one a memory. Some were given by travelers, others made in the hush of winter. He selects the thinnest bone edge, its length perfect for tracing the edge of forgotten shores. His hand moves in slow sweeps, drawing curves into the parchment like breath into glass. He hums a low note, a habit from childhood to keep his motion even. The tune is wordless, soft. Perhaps it once had lyrics, perhaps it never did. To his right, a chart of stars lies open. It is not night, but the stars still guide. He studies them briefly, aligning one arc of coastline with the known movement of Polaris, then lets the chart rest. He is not copying. He is translating, seeking the conversation between what the sea has whispered and what the stars confirm. Outside, the sea shifts. Wind pushes waves against the cliffs. The sound is distant thunder, steady, non-threatening, like a heartbeat just beyond the ear. It fills the quiet without disturbing it. He dips his quill into a deep green ink, one mixed with crushed nettle and oxidized copper. The color is earthy, softened, a tone that speaks not of empires or war, but of moss-covered stones and deep tide pools. The quill's nib touches the parchment and begins its slow journey. The ink does not flow fast. It moves as he does, deliberately. He charts in segments, never completing an entire section at once. He believes in layering, in building the map as one would build a memory, not all at once, but over time, with breath and reflection between each line. At the edge of the bench sits a small dish of sand. With each completed line, he sprinkles a whisper of it across the ink, watching it absorb the shine. This is not just to prevent smudging, it is ceremony. The grit catches the light like tiny stars, settling into the valleys of Vellum. He leans back occasionally, not to rest, but to see again. A map viewed too closely becomes its own world. Distance returns it to reality. He squints, then smiles faintly. A small islet, barely the size of a coin, has appeared near the border of the cape. He doesn't recall adding it, but there it is. Sometimes the sea remembers better than he does. On a shelf above, a glass orb holds slivers of magnetic stone, lodestone, used to align his inner compass when storms of doubt arise. He holds it for a moment now, not for direction, but for grounding. Its weight is honest, its silence reassuring. He returns to the parchment. The map is no longer blank, but neither is it full. Like the world, it remains in progress. Possibility stretches across its edges. He dips the quill once more, steadying his wrist. This next curve, he knows, will define the estuary, a place where river meets sea, where salt mingles with fresh water, where boats must turn or be taken. The moment is quiet, reverent. Outside, a gull lands on the sill. It watches him for a moment, head tilted, curious. He nods gently in its direction. The bird makes no sound, only blinks once and takes flight again. The brush of its wings against the wind leaves a hush in its wake. The cartographer continues, not quickly, not slowly, just right. The ritual of the compass has no end, only a rhythm. Ink, breath, sand, line, pause, look. The map grows, not as a task, but as a meditation. Hours pass unnoticed. The light shifts on the stone floor. He adds a final detail. A small harbour once described in a sailor's letter, said to smell of saffron and always face west. He places it there, tucked into the cove's bend, as if it had always waited to be seen. Sometimes he remembers the first map he ever made, drawn in the margins of an old book with a piece of charcoal, depicting nothing but imagined hills and a river made entirely of mist. He had no tools then, just wonder. That wonder still lingers, tucked in the corners of every line he draws today. It is not ambition that guides his hand, but reverence. He stretches his fingers, rolls his shoulders, then leans in once more. The world waits, not impatiently, but expectantly. He lifts the compass once more and prepares the next arc. The ritual begins again. The tower stands like a stone memory on the cliff's edge, older than the maps it protects. It does not lean nor groan but breathes, a slow inhalation of sea wind and a long exhale of silence. Its walls are thick, rough-hewn, and marked by centuries of salt and sun. Moss has begun to claim the northern face, and ivy curls up along the western flank, as if even the plants seek shelter within. Inside, the light moves like a guest. It enters softly through narrow, arched windows, casting long slants across bookshelves and drawers. Shadows stretch lazily over the stacked charts and instruments that line the curved interior. There are no corners in the tower. Everything curves, bends, rounds, like the earth he studies, like the paths of the stars he trusts. The walls are not bare, they are lined with memory, hanging calipers, dried herbs for ink, faded sketches of coastlines drawn in haste and in reverence. A wall of pigeonholes holds letters from sailors, fragments of coordinates, scraps of weather-worn vellum scrawled with notes and riddles. Nothing is discarded. Everything has a place, even if it is only to rest until its meaning becomes clear. The hearth, though small, is steadfast. It crackles faintly, a murmur in the room's deeper silence. Over it hangs a blackened kettle, forever warm. The smell of charred oak and old leather lingers, scented history. The floor beneath it is stone, smoothed by years of quiet footsteps and the scuff of wooden heels. A spiral staircase climbs the inner wall, narrow and steep, worn in the center from 1,000 climbs. Each step creaks in its own voice, familiar and predictable. It leads to the observatory above, a domed room ringed with star maps and a wide lens that frames the sea like a living map. The bed is simple. A cot against the wall, draped with thick woolen blankets and a single carved chest at its foot. A journal rests on the bedside shelf, its pages inked with weather, dreams, and thoughts too slow for speech. The pillow smells faintly of sea lavender, placed beneath it to ease the weight of memory. He moves through the tower not as its master, but as its steward. Each drawer opened is done with care, each book touched is acknowledged. He does not hurry from one task to the next. The tower holds time differently, as if minutes stretch, dilate, echo. In the southern alcove, a desk waits beneath a cluster of suspended glass orbs. Each is filled with sand from distant shores, labeled in a tiny, steady hand. Azores, Skye, Corsica, Solovki. The grains catch light and memory both, hanging like constellations of earth. When he writes beneath them, the sound is softened by the weight of silence and the hush of imagined tides. He stops, often, to simply be within the space, to breathe with the tower, to listen to its wood and stone shift slightly with the day's temperature. It does not speak in words, but in weight and warmth, in shadow and stillness. He touches the wall with one hand, palm flat as if greeting an old friend. The stone is cool, rough, unchanging. Yet it holds his presence like a page holds ink, not erased by time, but deepened by it. Sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and white, the tower vanishes from the world beyond. It becomes its own island, drifting above the sea. In those moments, the cartographer lights a lantern not for need, but for ceremony, a gesture to honor the visibility within when all else is hidden. The tower is solitude, but not loneliness. It is retreat, but not escape. It is a place where a man can become smaller than the world and feel larger for it. It is home. The cartographer does not receive visitors, not in the usual sense. The path to the Watchtower is long overgrown, and the sea has reclaimed the nearby dock with moss and tide. But the tower is never truly empty. Its walls hold memories thick as fog, and every shelf, every drawer, whispers of those who once passed through. There are letters, hundreds of them, tucked into pigeonholes, rolled into scrolls, stacked beneath weights of stone. Some are stained by sea spray, others faded by sun. All are voices from across water and time. He reads them not in haste, but in ritual, one each morning before he picks up a quill. It is a kind of prayer, a communion with those who charted these coasts before him. Some letters are requests, charts for narrow inlets, updated wind maps, the outline of a newly formed island. Others are apologies for missed rendezvous or brief notes of thanks, written in cramped hands on torn sailcloth. A few are from people who never gave names, only descriptions of stars or questions written as riddles. He keeps these closest, rereading them like scripture. One drawer is reserved for a single correspondence, a set of faded pages bound with twine, signed always by a woman who called herself simply E. Her hand was sharp and fluid, her words clipped yet intimate. She described distant skies, storms, and the feeling of watching a sunrise alone on deck. Her last letter came with a sketch, a bird mid-flight over a glimmering coast, and then no more. He keeps the bundle wrapped in oilskin beneath his pillow some nights. Not for longing, but for rhythm. Her words became part of the tides of his days. The tower holds more than letters. It holds objects left behind, a compass cracked but faithful, its needle still trembling when storms pass, a pair of leather gloves mended carefully with silk thread, a broken sextant whose brass still gleams in sunlight. These are offerings, tokens of presence. They rest in alcoves as if waiting for return. He sometimes speaks to them, not aloud but in gestures, a glance toward the compass when drawing new lines, a touch of the gloves before boiling tea, a nod to the sextant, now a paperweight on his cartography desk. The silence between these acts is not empty, it is respect. There are ghosts in the tower, though not the kind that moan or rattle chains. These are softer, quieter. They come in the curl of an old map's corner, in the echo of footsteps that are always his own, yet somehow not. He does not fear them. He walks with them. In the western alcove, beneath the smallest window, hangs a framed chart. The first full map he completed after arriving. It is flawed, a river misjudged, a cape slightly askew, but it is beloved. It holds within it the clumsy grace of beginnings. Visitors who came then are long gone, but the lines they inspired remain. Sometimes he finds things he did not place. A scrap of parchment tucked into a book, a small shell resting on a windowsill, a folded paper boat left atop his tea shelf. Whether these are memories, tricks, or something more, he never questions. He accepts them as part of the place. The tower is a vessel, and vessels gather what floats near. Outside, the waves change their rhythm. The sea murmurs as if in conversation, and he listens, ever attentive. The wind slips through cracks in the stone, carrying with it the scent of brine and distant firelight. It smells like stories unfinished, waiting to be told. He places a new letter in the shelf today, not to be sent, but to be kept. It is not addressed. It speaks only of a dream, a coast he has not yet seen, where the cliffs shine like obsidian and the tide hums in a forgotten key. He writes not with certainty, but with hope. That is enough. Visitors do not knock. They do not climb the hill. They arrive as thoughts, as objects, as whispers folded in the spine of a well-used book. And the cartographer greets them all the same, with stillness, with reverence, and with ink always ready to remember. On rare occasions, he dreams of voices, soft, indistinct, like the lapping of tide against wood. In these dreams, someone always speaks his name, not loudly, but with the weight of familiarity. He never sees their face. But when he wakes, the room feels warmer, as if someone had just left. He records these dreams in a narrow ledger, each entry dated in the margins. Most are brief, just a sentence or two. She was there again, watching from the mist. Or, the map spoke back tonight. He does not seek meaning in these phrases. He lets them rest, like low clouds across a still bay. And sometimes, when the night grows deep and the ink will not dry, he places a candle in the highest window and leaves the shutters open, just a crack. It is not a signal, not really. But perhaps, just perhaps, Someone out there still looks for light on the horizon. By midday, the sun glances off the sea like coins tossed into a fountain, scattering light in bright, fragmented patterns. The tower warms gently, stone absorbing sun with a slow and steady pulse. It is not heat, but a hush, a golden quiet that seeps into the floor, the walls and his bones. The cartographer moves less now, not from weariness, but because the afternoon demands it. There is a stillness that descends after the morning's work, a pause not for idleness, but for presence. He pours a second cup of tea, cooler now, steeped with mint and fennel, and lets the scent open his lungs. He sits by the eastern window, where the view rolls out in blues and greys, marked only by the occasional white wing of a gull or the darker pulse of a passing whale's breath. The sea, from this height, becomes not an object, but a feeling. It stretches not just in space, but in time. On the ledge, small items gather. A smoothed piece of driftwood shaped like a crescent, a shard of blue glass, a bit of rope tied in a knot he can no longer name. These are not collected. They arrive over years, and he gives them place. Each is a conversation he no longer remembers beginning. The air inside is thick with sun and parchment. Dust motes float like the faintest thoughts, lazy and luminous. He leans back in his chair, letting the warmth soak into his robe. His eyes trace the seam between sea and sky, blurred now, as if the world has chosen rest. He picks up a map not to study, but to feel. The vellum is soft, edges worn. It depicts a coastline he traced years ago, its shapes now more familiar than his own reflection. He remembers the weather that day, the creak of the tower in wind, the exact moment the estuary revealed its third curve. Time folds differently in the afternoon. Hours stretch and loop, not in urgency, but in rhythm. He does not track them. He listens to their shape. The wind shifts slightly, pushing air through the tower's cracks and over the open mouths of ink bottles. The scent rises, metallic, herbal, sweet. He does not speak. There is no one to speak to, but even his silence feels heard, as if the tower itself listens, nodding in the soft groan of its beams, as if the sea, in all its motion, pauses just slightly to match his breath. He eats simply, a slice of oat bread, some aged cheese, a few olives wrapped in linen from the cellar below. Each bite is taken slowly, chewed fully, then followed by a sip of water from a clay cup. The glaze has cracked in one corner, forming a spiderweb that catches the light. Outside, gulls cry once more, but even their calls seem softened. Their flight is less purposeful now, more drift than hunt. The world, it seems, agrees that this is a time for less. He closes his eyes, not to sleep, but to still. The maps remain open, the quill uncapped, but for now the work is to wait, to absorb, to honor the pause between lines. He traces a line in the air, not with ink, but with a fingertip, marking a path from memory. It goes nowhere in particular, just a curve that pleases the hand, a motion familiar, like the tide curling against a favored cove. Above him, a beam creaks faintly, shifting with the warmth. The sound is old, comforting, a reminder that even wood and stone stretch in the sun. He smiles faintly, grateful for such company. In the far corner, a single chime rings once, moved by nothing he can see. But he does not rise to investigate. Some notes are meant to be left unanswered. This is the afternoon drift, a time not of doing, but of being. The decision to ink a coastline is never made lightly. It is a commitment, a quiet declaration that this shape, this curve, this meeting of land and sea is as true as he can understand it. The cartographer prepares for this moment with a pause, a breath, and a steadying of the wrist. He selects his finest quill, a tool with a split feather trimmed meticulously and soaked in oil the night before. It fits his hand like a memory, familiar and precise. Beside it sits a pot of ink, dark as midnight, with a sheen that catches even the softest light. He stirs it gently with a sliver of bone, watching the surface ripple once, then still. The map is unrolled fully now. Its lines are ghostly outlines, traced and redrawn, waiting for affirmation. He begins not at the heart, but at the edge, a peninsula stretching like a finger into the sea. He touches the nib to vellum and draws the line slowly, letting the ink settle into the grain like water into sand. The sound is subtle, a whisper of resistance, of texture. The vellum responds with grace, receiving each motion like breath. He does not rush. His strokes are careful, deliberate, as if tracing the edge of something alive. Outside, the wind quiets. The sea seems to hold its breath. Even the tower stills. All of nature conspires to let this line emerge, clean and whole. It bends gently inland, curls back outward, forms a bay he once saw from a cliff wrapped in fog. He lifts the quill, exhales slowly. One line, one truth. He sprinkles a bit of fine ash across it, not sand this time, collected from the hearth on the winter solstice. It darkens the ink slightly, anchors it in time. The next line waits, and the next. A rhythm begins. Draw, lift, breathe, dust. It is not unlike walking a path long forgotten, remembered only by the feel of footfalls and the shape of shadows. He pauses, just briefly, to adjust the angle of the parchment. Light spills across it now, softer with the tilt of the sun. Shadows fall into the grooves of the drawn lines, giving them weight, like paths carved into land rather than ink upon skin. He allows a fingertip to trail beside the newest line, not to correct, but to feel. There's a vibration in the freshly marked edge, like a pulse. He nods to it, a quiet approval, a vow kept. The map accepts him as much as he accepts it. Dusk comes slowly to the watchtower, as if the day is reluctant to leave. The light turns honeyed, brushing the stone walls with warm gold before softening into deep amber. The sea below shifts its voice, a lower register now, gentler, like a lullaby composed by wind and wave. The cartographer sets his tools aside, brushing the last traces of ash from the map. His fingers linger on the vellum's edge, the inked lines gleaming faintly in the angled light. He rolls the map carefully, ties it with a linen ribbon, and places it among the others, each a day's dialogue preserved. He stands by the western window, watching the horizon drink the last of the sun. Shadows stretch, not sharply, but like slow breaths reaching toward the sea. The air cools. The salt grows sharper. Somewhere a bird gives its final call, a thread of sound pulled into the fabric of evening. He lights a single lantern, its glow small and sure. It casts a circle of warmth around the workbench. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The day is ending, and the sea is breathing, and he breathes with it. The tower hums faintly, holding the warmth of the day in its stones. It is a lull, a hush that settles not just in walls and windows, but in thought itself. He does not wish to move, only to witness, only to let the quiet finish what the ink began. He closes his eyes, listening to the sea's breath, long and even. It is the sound of old stories told without words. The final light has dimmed, and the map is finished. Not perfect, never perfect, but whole. It bears its truths like scars, honest, uneven, and shaped by time. The cartographer lifts it once more, holding it in both hands like a question answered. A story told. He carries it to the shelf with care, sliding it between two older scrolls. Each map here has its own voice, its own breath. They do not rest in silence, but in patient dialogue. He lingers a moment, fingertips brushing the spines of his work, not to sort, not to count, but to acknowledge. Back at the workbench, he gathers his tools. The quill returned to its carved box, the ink sealed, the sand brushed gently into a jar. The desk is wiped clean, the candles trimmed for tomorrow. This, too, is ritual, the closing of the day, as sacred as its beginning. He pours one last cup of tea, chamomile and lavender, and walks to the window where night has settled fully. The sea is a dark mirror now, the stars just beginning to scatter across its surface. He drinks slowly, letting the warmth pool in his chest. A breeze moves through the room, lifting a few curls of parchment. One falls to the floor, blank and waiting. He picks it up, turns it over, and sets it on the desk. Not for work, not yet, but ready, always ready. He walks through the quiet space, checking shutters, dousing the lantern, touching the frame of the western window where the moon now hangs low and wide. Each movement is slow, deliberate, not from tiredness, but from respect. In the loft above, the bed waits beneath a patchwork quilt, the fabric sun-faded and soft. He climbs the stairs, joints creaking in rhythm with the tower's own settling frame. He lays down, hands folded over his chest, eyes open to the rafters above. The map is finished, but the world is not. It continues just beyond ink and edge, turning in soft mystery. And tomorrow, another page will begin. He closes his eyes, not to end the day, but to meet the next with stillness. He does not dream of distant lands or uncharted seas. He dreams of paper, of the weight of tools in his hand, of a single line drawn with care. He dreams of silence, of the steady hush that fills the tower when all things are at rest. These are not dreams of escape. They are dreams of presence, of belonging in a world measured not in miles, but in moments. The stars outside blink softly, scattered like thoughts not yet written down. The night deepens, the tower holds. In the darkness, the sea breathes, and the cartographer dreams.